I want to share a theory that I have about painting the same subject multiple times. I believe that not only will your painting get better through basic practice, but you will actually see differently and come up with more interesting ideas. Let me show you what I mean. I started out painting from real life this sweet little orchid that was growing a bit crooked. I quickly penciled in my drawing. I wasn't trying to improve anything, I was just trying to draw it just like I saw it. If you've seen many of my videos, you'll notice that I will often outline a subject, but usually I'm using something like a hot pink or magenta. But I thought it would be great color harmony since I was going to be having the blue and white pot to do the complement of blue, which is orange. So that's why I put in that orange outline. I'm using the blue and white with a touch of orange to gray it down for the shadows on these orchids. Again, just trying to keep good color harmony. I've gotten in my greens using a sap green and cad yellow, lightening those stems a little bit. Now I'm using ultramarine blue to put in just a super simple little design on that pot, more simple than what the pot actually was. Using a little darker blue under the shadow. Now I'm using a light blue violet just to put in a background color. Sometimes it helps me a lot to see something against the background. It helps my eye to make more sense of things. Now I'm using a burnt sienna to put in the top of that leather book. Just making sure the spine looks a little darker than the top. Can't say I did a great job on that. I'm going back and just kind of redefining these orchids a little bit, and I'm putting in that little center section where you look down into the throat of the orchid, using that cad orange again and the yellow again, just trying to repeat the same colors, using them multiple times in the painting. So this was my first go at painting the orchid as I saw it. Not too great. So let's see what happens with my second try. There were several things I really did not like about that first painting, and the first was that in the original there were two leather books, but it looked like there was only one the way I painted it. And also I felt like the angle of the orchid could be a whole lot more interesting. So look what happened by just turning the angle of the books a little bit and turning the orchid about 90 degrees. What a difference that made to the composition. I wanted to keep the colors the same to keep this experiment fair, so I decided to try orange as the background rather than the blue. Gosh, I thought that was a whole lot more effective. Love the orange. Here I'm using ultramarine with a lot of white, just getting that shadow in. So here all the foliage now is coming forward instead of sticking out to the side. So it gives this really interesting angle and perspective. This was a lot more fun to paint and getting that right perspective. You know, I'm adding in a leaf in the back that's actually going to go fold over the back of that cup. Decided to add a little more brown into the moss mix, which I think made it look a little more natural. I added just a variety of colors, more layers of color there, rather than it looking so flat. And I like clear, colorful things. And in the other painting, I felt like the orchid, the gray that I used, just looked gray and drab. Here I'm just using ultramarine and white for the shadow, which just satisfies my soul a lot better for that color range. It just looks perkier and friendlier and, I don't know, not drab. I'm just adding in the connecting stems, doing that very loosely with a large brush, just keeping everything loose, going back over it with some lighter green. Getting lights lighter and darks darker. I love a lot of contrast. Here I'm being a little more careful with the blue and white, and I'm putting in a pattern that's a little more complicated, although it was super simple to do. I'm just using a little flat brush and just dropping in some little square pieces, lightening it as I go around the corner of the piece of pottery. Really simple to do, but certainly looked a lot better than the first go round. And here I'm putting in that throat again, and this time I decided to make a little more of a statement with it. I'm adding a little more color, which again, I think it just makes it a little more interesting, gives it a little more depth. You really get the feeling you're just looking right down that throat. Here we have painting number 1 and 2 side by side. When I started to paint the second one, I couldn't help but look at the first one and identify things I didn't like, and there were several. So painting it a second time wasn't just a matter of perfecting the same painting, but my brain started generating ideas to make the composition more interesting with the books and turning the orchid. I saw that changing the background might improve it. I didn't like the orange outline in the first one, so I left that out. All of this happened because I painted it twice. Had I stopped at the first painting, it would have been a disappointing attempt. So let's see what happens with the third try. It's funny how your brain only sees certain possibilities. Well, by the third try, the thought occurred to me, well, how about making it square rather than sticking with the rectangle just because I was using a rectangular sheet of paper? I just hadn't thought about that before. So I lined off a big square on my pad, and I intentionally brought the bowl forward, made it much bigger, and had it go off the bottom of the page. Just loved it. And look at dropping in that orange with those square edges rather than the more ragged one. I just thought it was fabulous. On this orchid, I decided to make it cream, and I used a Naples yellow for the shadows of it. And it completely changed the vibe of that whole painting. I love the color harmony. It was just a softer look, but it was a little more contemporary look. I don't know. It looked very different than the white with the blue. So I really like that part a lot. And it's interesting, the third go round, I started noticing detail in the orchid that I hadn't really noticed before. And I started making the stems more interesting. I put that line down the center of the leaves. I noticed that there were roots. Well, there are always roots on orchids. I don't know why I didn't pay attention to that before, but I just saw so much more detail. I love this curve, these curvy lines of the stems that I'm putting in. Just it, to me, it started looking a little more oriental the way this was doing with all the curves inside the square. I just really love the effect. This was by far my favorite. And here we have me taking things off the edge of the painting, stopping at that square box. Here's a close up of some of the detail that I thought was just beautiful, and still a very quick painting. It only took me a few minutes, but gosh, it's just funny how much different this one looks from the other two. So here we see the progression. In the upper left is the orchid that I was painting. The top right is the first painting, which now looks very childish, I think, compared to the other paintings. The bottom left is the second painting. I think it's much more interesting. Love the books. Love that it's turned. But by far my favorite is the third one. The painting it inside of a square. I love the bowl being brought forward, things being enlarged. I love the curviness. I love the extra detail. Yep. So it wasn't just a matter of getting better at doing the same painting. It was a matter of the imagination kicking in, creative juices started to flow, and I was able to do a much more interesting painting by the third time. Hey, if you found this video interesting, you might really like the next one coming up, how I just changed the background color of a painting and it completely changed the feeling. I think you'll enjoy it. Thanks for watching. God bless.